All right, welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin here. Please mute your cell phones. And if you need a parking sticker because you parked in the Civic Center deck, please see the front table and get yourself a parking sticker. And if you wish to sign up to speak this evening, whether it's on an item on the agenda or at the end of our meeting, under just any item, any topic you want that wasn't on the agenda, please sign up at the table you passed on your way into the chamber. Tonight we're going to begin as usual with a Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm just checking to make sure we still have the flag there tonight. So please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, we actually have a proclamation. This is a new post-COVID re-emergence of the proclamation. So we're going to celebrate that. It is Building Safety Month, and I think Mark Matheny, who is one of our other chiefs, but he is the chief building official, is here to receive this proclamation. And I will meet you down there at the microphone. Great. All right, I'll begin by reading the proclamation. Whereas Asheville is committed to recognizing that our growth and strength depends on the safety and essential roles of our homes, buildings, and infrastructure play both in everyday life and when disasters strike. And whereas our confidence in the resilience of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, plumbers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council, a nonprofit that brings together local, state, territorial, tribal, and federal officials who are experts in the built environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, and play. And whereas these modern building codes include safeguards to protect the public from hazards such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, floods, and earthquakes, and whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown protectors of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us of safe, sustainable, and affordable buildings that are essential to America's prosperity. And whereas Safety for All, Building Codes in Action, the theme for Building Safety Month 2022, encourages us all to raise awareness about planning for safe and sustainable construction, career opportunities in building safety, understanding disaster mitigation and energy conservation, and creating a safe and abundant water supply to all of our benefit. And whereas each year, in observance of Building Safety Month, people all over the world are asked to consider the commitment to improve building safety, resilience, and economic investment at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments, fire prevention bureaus, and federal agencies in protecting the lives and property. Now, therefore, I, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2022 as Building Safety Month in the City of Asheville and encourage our citizens to join with their communities to participate in Building Safety Month activities. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mayor and council members. We do this, it really is an honor to be up here and to hear the proclamation and all the items that are part of that. And it really is an honor to take this with your support, right? So we really, throughout the year, I know this is 1 month, this is one statement, but throughout the year, the support that we get through our department in the construction industry is really an honor. You know, it's super important for us to have, obviously, safe buildings, people to have an inherent knowledge that where they go and what they come in and out of is safe. Each building by itself and then each building into a community, right? But with the advancements in the code and the advancements in building technology and building sciences, that also extends off to energy efficiency, much greater energy efficiency, as well as resiliency for individual buildings and throughout the community. And I would just like to say we do have a couple people from the construction industry. We've got representatives from Home Builders Association. We've got design professionals here with us, and also we've got some representatives from the Development Services staff. So thank you again, much appreciated.
If those folks could stand up, that would be great, so we can recognize them. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have questions, comments, or a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
This is
Move to
Kim.
adopt. I'm sorry.
I have a question about item E. If we could just have a note about what council responsibilities will happen moving forward.
Okay, and I'm going to call on our city attorney, Brad Branham, to talk about that one.
Thank you, Mayor. So the item on the consent agenda tonight, referenced by Council Member Roney, deals with a request to affirm the city's policy with regard to the adoption of personnel policies. There is in North Carolina a delineation in council manager forms of government about the responsibilities and powers that are delegated specifically to the city council and those that are delegated to the city manager, who is by law the chief administrative officer of the city. What we have tried to do in this resolution is to provide some clarity in a situation where we were lacking it. There has been a long-standing history of changes to our personnel policies throughout the city. Some of those have been made at the council level, some of those have been made through the Civil Service Board process, and some of those have been made by the city manager. We are attempting now to update our city policies, much of which are somewhat drastically out of date, some of which are now confusing because there is a difference between some policies that have been adopted as part of a council resolution from the early 90s and several actions that have been taken to update those policies throughout the years by the city managers. What we are asking now is for an affirmation by the city council to put us on the right track for the records purpose, showing which body is responsible for what, either the city council or the city manager's office. All of this is actually defined under your city charter in multiple provisions, as well as in the North Carolina state statutes. We are not asking for any change in the delegation of authority that already exists, but we are trying to make sure that our record now reflects going forward who has the responsibility that's dictated under the charter and the state statutes. We do think there's some lack of clarity about that right now.
And council would still retain the authority to pass, say, a living wage ordinance or non-discrimination ordinance, correct?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. One important statute that I would call council and the public's attention to is North Carolina General Statute 160A-164, and it specifically discusses those powers that are inherent to city councils. I would describe those as general policy matters that don't involve the day-to-day operations of individual employees and their personnel actions. Council, for example, has the ability to adopt pay plans through the budget process, non-discrimination ordinances, which you have, holiday schedules, and living wage policies. Those are still within council's authority, and the action we're asking you to take tonight has absolutely no effect on those powers or authorities. The council manager form of government provides to the manager essentially the day-to-day functions of employee process and personnel matters.
Thank you for that clarity.
Maggie, just to check, we don't have anyone signed up to speak under the consent agenda? Okay, I just turned myself off. If there aren't any other questions, do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
This is Gwen, so moved.
Sandra, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? You want to do that again? Did we get everybody? Okay, it was 7-0 aye, all right. All right, next, we do not have any presentations and reports tonight. on our agenda. So we're going to move right into the public hearings. And the first one is a public hearing to consider the permanent closing of a right-of-way alley known as Rear Clingman Avenue off the eastern side of Clingman Avenue. I didn't know there was a Rear Clingman Avenue. So Jessica Morris is here to talk to us about this requested closure.
Good evening, Council. Jessica Morris, Assistant Director of the Transportation Department. We have for you this evening a proposed right-of-way closure that is for an alley that is known as Rear Clingman Alley. It connects to Clingman Avenue between Patton and Hilliard. The applicant for this closure is Delray Ventures, and this is associated with the Avery project, which was recently approved by Council. Rear Clingman Avenue connects to the east side of Clingman, and it serves the adjacent properties. However, it does not connect through to Pearl Street. This is an aerial of the Avery project boundary proposal, and the orange line represents the alley that is sought to be closed.
And Jessica, the requester owns both sides of the property. I mean, I think it's a related entity or something. That owns
Correct,
both
yeah.
sides of the alley.
Correct. So the white roof building, in kind of in the middle, top middle, is the Patton 1, which was also completed by the same developer. So as I mentioned, this is associated with the Avery project, and it is located at 363 Hilliard. Just to recap, originally, the conditional zoning request was denied at the February 22nd meeting of the council. However, subsequently, the applicant revised their proposal, returned to council, and it was approved on March 8th. These are some photos, might be a little hard to see, of the alley taken from Clingman. The one-story building in the foreground is the United States Postal Service Maintenance Building. The alley is connecting to Clingman in the middle, and the project site is on the right side of these photos. And you can see the Patton 1 existing building in the background. One of the things that's sort of connected to this right-of-way closure request is a bicycle lane that is part of the conditions of approval for the Avery project. We discussed this with the applicant as something that we thought would be a great benefit to the city and to transportation connectivity. So the Avery project includes the improvement of the existing bike lane on Hilliard, and it would be essentially an improvement of what's there. They would be bringing in their curb line slightly to create a fully separated bike lane. This is a view looking west on Hilliard, and you can see the bike lane is essentially just within the driving lane. And so the Avery project would be improving this to make it a full separated bike lane. And this is looking east. The project site is on the left. And this is a rendering provided by the applicant that shows the bike lane. So TRC recommended approval of the right-of-way closure request, and this was based on the Avery project's proposed site plan, the provision of the new bike lane, and additional proposed pedestrian amenities. In multimodal commission, we took this the day after the project was initially brought to council, and in which case it was denied on February 22nd. So the day after that, the multimodal commission declined to make a recommendation at that point. And so after the applicant returned to council and got council approval for the project, given the time constraints we had, we didn't take it back to the multimodal commission for their recommendation. But at the meeting, they didn't have any real issues or concerns with it. They just didn't want to make a recommendation on something that the council had just denied the night before.
Jessica, can I provide some clarity on?
Sure.
Or ask for maybe some clarity? The way I heard it in the multimodal meeting was that they lacked information on a future project. So they didn't want to recommend a closure of the right of way without knowing what that project would be.
Correct.
Is that the, okay.
So our proposed motion tonight is to permanently close a right-of-way alley known as Rear Clingman Avenue, which is east of Clingman Avenue between Patton Avenue and Hilliard Avenue. That's it.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions? Otherwise, I will open the public hearing on this item. Right, and I will close the public hearing on this item because no one signed up to speak on it. Any other questions, comments, or a motion?
This is Kim. So I just want to name that as the liaison to the Multimodal Transportation Commission. I do hear a thread of concerns that we have right-of-ways throughout the city, and these are leveraging points for us to ensure benefits in the public right-of-way. So there's still lingering questions in general about the right-of-ways in the city, responsibility for maintaining, but also what is the public benefit of that land. So I do appreciate that the multimodal makes those recommendations, and I hope that as often as we can continue to have that kind of input from advisory boards.
And in the case of closures, it's required that it seek that input. It's my understanding of the process.
I don't think that the state law requires.
No, not state law,
Oh.
that our process.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, do I have a motion? Did I already ask for a motion to approve? Somebody give me a motion to approve.
I make a motion to adopt a resolution to permanently close a right-of-way alley known as Rear Clingman Avenue off the eastern side of Clingman Avenue associated with the Avery project.
I'll second. This is Sage.
We have a motion and a second. And Sandra, your light's on. Do you have, or you're just getting ready to vote? Okay, everybody ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, great. Oh my God, I'm just gonna leave this on. Thank you, Jessica. So the next item we have is a public hearing to consider conditional zoning of 275 Deverview Road from RM16 Residential Multifamily High Density District to Residential Expansion District Conditional Zone. And we have not scared off Will Palmquist yet. He is back for more. So Planner Will Palmquist is here to present this item to us.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is a conditional zoning request for a project known as the Deverview Infill Apartments. So as you can see here, the current zoning of this property is RM16, multifamily residential high density at a 20.7 acre site currently owned by the Asheville Housing Authority. And due to the size of the proposed project, a rezoning to residential expansion conditional zone is required. Here you can see the aerial imagery of the site, which is currently the Deverview Apartments, highlighted in red, and the surrounding properties, which are industrial to the east and mostly single family to the south, as well as a relatively new multifamily project to the north and west on Westmore Place. And this map shows the future land use of the property as designated in the Asheville Comprehensive, Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, which is the basis for evaluating the reasonableness of conditional zoning requests. The future land use for this property is residential neighborhood, which is described as a mix of residential uses such as mostly single family in a suburban style, but also duplexes and some multifamily. And it is noted that these areas of the city that are designated residential neighborhood could improve with the addition of more types of residential uses. So this project, as shown here, which is zoomed in on the southern portion of the site, and I'll get to more detailed views of both of those areas, are concentrated at the the southwest and the southeast of the parcel in 3 different buildings. In total, 82 new units are proposed. At the southeast of the property, a demolition of the existing community center and playground is proposed. Let's see if you can highlight that. As far as access to the new buildings go, a new driveway is proposed off of Deverview Road, as shown here, and an existing driveway at North Bear Creek Road is proposed to be just slightly moved to the north to accommodate Building 3, as well as the existing buildings off that parking lot as well. In total, 98 parking spaces are proposed. Proposed sidewalks are 5 feet wide with an 8-foot wide planting strip. Just to note that the extent of the sidewalk will basically be along Deverview Road in front of each of the building areas, but they will not connect as currently proposed. But a future phase of the project would connect them. At Bear Creek Road, the sidewalk would end at the proposed driveway location. And other requirements such as open space and tree preservation standards, as well as landscaping, apply and will be complied with. And just to note, this project would be what's proposed as like a first phase of, at least first of maybe 2 or 3 phases to renovate the buildings at this site. This first phase would basically allow for about half the residents at the apartments to move into these 2 new buildings, while the remainder of the site or portions thereof are redeveloped. So this is the site plan zoomed in on the southwest corner of the proposed project, buildings 1 and 2 on the prior sheet. They're similar buildings are each 3 stories tall with 12 units each and a maximum height of 32 feet. They're a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units in building 1 on the left, and a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom units in building 2. Building 3 is a bit larger. It's 4 stories in height and has 58 units proposed total, most of which are 1 bedroom units and some are 2 bedroom. Maximum height is 42 feet 8 inches. And in this building, there will be at least 2,000 square feet of community amenity space provided. And then as far as the design of the buildings, these are elevations of building number 1, done in a fairly common residential style. Different types of materials include a low maintenance lap siding, so that is probably either vinyl or fiber cement, with stone veneer accents and asphalt shingle roof. You can see the kind of main entrance elevation on the north, which would face the parking lot and have this canopy proposed. Building 2 is very similar, just a different arrangement of some of the masses and the roof forms. This building also has a laundry room proposed off to the west, I believe, which is where residents would be able to do laundry. Here's building 3, a bit larger. The top elevation shows the south elevation, which is the view from Deverview Road. And this is the north elevation, so kind of looking south down Bear Creek Road or from the interior of the property. You can see the main entrance on the south elevation at the east end, which would be at the corner of Deverview and Bear Creek Roads. This is the north elevation in more detail. And then the west elevation, partial and perspective views as well. And then the east elevation, and again, you can see this corner element. So this would be the view along Bear Creek Road where the land slopes and the building accommodates it as shown. There's an area for some signage for the project located here, and this overhang corner element to kind of anchor the development. The proposed materials are similar to the other two buildings as far as the siding, stone veneer, and roof elements go. And this is a perspective that was included of building number 3, as seen looking to the south from the interior of the site. So as far as the project's consistency with the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, as noted earlier, the future land use map is residential neighborhood, and staff finds that the project is consistent with that future land use designation by providing residential uses and a diversity in housing types. The project also increases the supply of housing, including affordable housing, in proximity to employment, transit, and parks. And the project promotes the development and availability of affordable and workforce housing by redeveloping the public housing stock. And those are specific goals from the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan. So as far as the review process, the project's been on already. It's not located in a design review area, so it only had to go to the Technical Review Committee, which is a staff level review, which was approved with conditions at the March meeting earlier this year, and also review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which unanimously recommended approval of the project at its meeting in earlier in April. And then as far as any conditions on the project is seeking 2 technical modifications from the standards in the Unified Development Ordinance, one of which is that the proposed sidewalks are proposed to be less than 10 feet in width, and also that the total number of parking spaces is 98, which is less than the required 100 minimum per the number of bedrooms and residential units. Other considerations of the project listed in the project conditions is that all 82 units will be designated affordable for a minimum of 30 years to those earning an average of 60% area median income, and will accept HACA housing choice vouchers. And also just reiterating that 2,000 square feet of community amenity space will be provided in Building 3 in the southeast of the site. Therefore, staff concurs with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
So I know Dave Nash, the Director of the Housing Authority, is here, hiding behind you. Dave, can you come? Well, thank you. And somebody else probably has more questions for you, but that was excellent. Dave, can you talk to us a little bit? I mean, this is the redevelopment of public housing. I'd like you to talk to us about 2 things. One is the current residents and how you're going to manage the transition so folks move from one. So I know that you're phasing this one, you're trying to phase this one so that folks aren't displaced. That was one question. And the second, the 30-year minimum affordability, I mean, that kind of looks like tax credit requirements. Is that your plan, that it would just follow the requirements for tax credit funded construction, or because this will be an asset of the Housing Authority, is the idea that it would be in perpetuity on your books? Tell us, I'm sorry, there were 2 very different questions, but.
Sure. I'll start with the last one. Yes, the plan is that it would be in perpetuity on our books. Eventually, for the tax credit purposes, it goes into the ownership of an LLC for a period of time. And at the end of 15 years, the Housing Authority would have a right of first refusal to purchase back the interest of the tax credit investor. In our past experience with a similar project, we purchased back that interest for $1 from the investor that we usually work with. So, particularly with some additional financing that we'll talk about on a different day, if we're able to model this on the Maple Crest project, the Housing Authority will have a long-term secondary mortgage that will essentially fend off any other developers who might want to purchase that asset and convert it to some other use. So it will be a perpetual affordability at a range of incomes. hopefully up to 80% of median, but right now, based on some IRS guidance, we can only guarantee 60% of median.
Is it possible for you to add that as a condition, the affordability and perpetuity, or the affordability levels that you've presented here in perpetuity?
I think we've talked to staff about the grant that we've requested, adding that as a condition to the grant. And we'd be glad.
Oh,
to do
I
that.
see how you're
Yeah,
doing
coming back
this.
for a
Okay, we
funding
know.
request.
Okay, all right, I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
So we could add it as a condition to the funding request that we should expect at a
Right,
future
okay.
meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
The other question was plan for relocation. When we did Maple Crest, we were very careful with the relocation. We moved about 85 families. Some of them, most of them moved into our other developments, and it was, it was a disruption for everybody. Some moved with tenant-based vouchers into private developments or other tax credit properties. And when the time came to move back, about half of the ones who could move back decided to move back because they had gotten settled where they were. Some of them moved out of state, and some of them thought that the new development was too big, so they were more comfortable staying where they were. So there were many reasons for that, but the fundamental reality was that they had to move twice, and that made a difference in terms of retention of the residents. So in this case, we'd like to build first and then relocate the first families once into the new units, then tear down those buildings and start with the second phase. And the unit sizes have been designed to fit the families who currently live in the first 15 buildings of Deverview apartments. So those are the ones that are closest to the new buildings, and that's the plan. And our hope, and we'd like for that to be our new model, whenever possible.
May I ask a question? Okay, now just to sort of give me an example. So basically, how many units are there in Deverview
There are-
presently? And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
you can answer that one first. Okay.
There are 160 units in Deverview
Okay, so you're
currently.
probably, half of them you'll be able to
Right.
actually accommodate with that. Okay, and could you actually give me an idea as to the size of these as opposed to the other units, the older Deverview units?
They meet or exceed the Housing Finance Agency minimum square footage, so they'll be larger than the old units.
They'll be larger than the older units? Oh,
And
okay.
all the units will be on a single level, so there won't be any stairs internal to the apartments. Most of the apartments at Deverview have a living space downstairs,
Yeah.
stairwell going up, and the bathroom is upstairs along with all the bedrooms. So the new development will make the unit within it fully accessible to everyone. And with the elevator building on the southwest corner, all of the units will be accessible to anybody in a wheelchair. But it'll be a lot easier for the families to maneuver within the units. They'll be more spacious. They'll be designed with wide doorways so that people with mobility issues can easily access all parts of the development.
Okay, and this is one last question. I sort of didn't hear it earlier. I know you answered it, but we were talking about the 30-year, basically, the limit on that, and you said you could possibly buy it back from the developer. Are there any guarantees or any deed restrictions they're going to put in there to make sure that is a possibility? Or
Yes. There are three things that we did at Maple Crest that we want to do here. One is we're leasing the land to the new LLC. We're not selling it. Number two, there's an IRS statutory right of first refusal for the developer, for the managing entity, to purchase back the equity interest of the tax credit investor after 15 years. And that will definitely be in there, and that will be in the name of the Housing Authority.
Thank you.
And then the third thing is, with secondary financing, there are some scenarios where it could be sold, but with the secondary financing, if it were sold to an outside entity, then that debt to the housing authority, where we accumulate the money and loan it into the project, would have to be paid off. So that makes a difference in terms of marketability to other investors. And so with that investment, we can say that it will be affordable in perpetuity.
So nothing in the deed.
Well, we're going to be
There's no deed.
hearing
There's
another
no
request
deed.
for funding that we can tie it to, just not tonight. Tonight, we're reviewing plans and zoning.
There's no deed. There's the lease, and we can put that in the lease, I guess, but the lease of the land. I can't remember if we did that in Maple Crest, but thank you for that.
Thanks.
Oh, David, can you, so I know this is only, tell me how many units we have right now? And then, with this whole thing, how many units will there be? Because it's my impression that you are looking to maximize the density on this property. And so will this get more units or more people?
Yes.
And what are those numbers?
Right now, there are 160 units. Phase one is 82 new units, but when we complete the entire property, it's currently zoned RM16 until you vote tonight. So that would be 320 units on 20 acres of land. And that is our goal, to have 320 units. Mixed income, we'd like to include some homeownership opportunities in there. But when all phases are done, we'd like to have 320 units.
And the 320 is just the property that the housing authority owns right now. It doesn't include anyone else's property?
That's correct.
Okay. And then help me out again with why this conditional zoning couldn't include in perpetuity for affordability? I get that you're wanting to tie
I'll
that
say-
to a funding request, but if you didn't get the funding, you can't do you can only do the 30 years of affordability?
If we don't get the funding, we can't do the project, so.
At all?
Yeah. So if you want to make that a condition of this zoning, I think that's within your discretion, obviously. And I'm not.
That
I'm
would
not
make me
saying-
happier.
I'm not
But-
saying no to it,
Yeah.
but just understand that, and what we were saying earlier is with the structured financing, we can really tie that down. And I guess I don't care where you put it, but but we're going to need the financing one way or another.
Right, you're going to need the funding to make the project work.
Right.
And then, I would like that to be in this conditional zoning. And so I know that one of the conditions is that the sidewalks aren't going to be 10 feet. So are some of them going to be 10 feet? Where's the sidewalk width right now? And what were the constraints to not allow 10 feet sidewalks?
The constraints are trying to fit as many units as possible into that existing undeveloped space with only tearing down the office building. There are no sidewalks right now. People walk on the grass or on the street. So and I think part of the intent was, instead of having concrete all the way out to the street, we wanted also to have an 8-foot planting strip. So it's 13 feet of space, an 8-foot planting strip, and a 5-foot sidewalk, instead of a 10-foot sidewalk that goes straight to the road. That's the request, and that was, if the architect was here, he could probably answer it more technically, but I think it was a space constraint to make everything fit, get enough parking behind the building and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Can we hear from the city attorney? Is there any reason that this couldn't be a condition, the long-term in perpetuity?
None that I'm aware of in terms of your process. And certainly this could be tied to a future funding request. I think that there is a difference in the remedy for those things. If it's tied to the funding, then the remedy would be limited to recouping the funding, where certainly funding can come from multiple sources. Only land entitlements can come from this body. So I would say that the remedy is superior for the city if it is tied to the zoning request.
And I guess I would say, if we can think that through a little bit more, you know, we're doing a rezoning for the whole 20.7 acres. We'd like to include more mixed income in the whole 20-acre project, not just 60% of area median and below. So if there can be some flexibility in that regard, it should still be affordable within a range. I mean, our range is 80% of area median income. But I mean, with this understanding that there may need to be some flexibility as we plan out the future phases, that's all I would ask you to consider.
Mr. Nash, am I hearing you say that it could be a condition if the language was changed up to 80% AMI?
As far as I'm concerned, that's true, yes.
But I think what you're also saying is it's conditioned on the funding, the additional funding to be able to do it. So, you know, what we're talking about here is whether to tie it to the zoning or to the funding, and probably, since it's a land, where you could do both. But I'm a little bit worried about our ability to wordsmith it on the spot. So how should we?
Well, we're coming back to you on the funding in less than 2 weeks.
Typically, when we see these conditional rezonings, we do get a condition listed for the term of affordability. I think that's what you're experiencing up here. We're used to seeing that. So this is a little different than what we're used to. And you being the housing authority and knowing that your mission is to provide affordable housing, it seems like a simple fix. But we don't want to complicate your NCHFA application or future plans for home ownership. I think that's also something we value.
And the home ownership will be affordable home ownership, serving our clients as well for the most part.
But to get to that step, you may end up with an 80% AMI range that you need to hit.
Sure.
In the aggregate in the project.
80% for some folks, averaging 60%.
60, which was the intent anyway. I mean, that's
correct.
So I don't know, Brad, if you can on the spot finagle, but I would like to see the affordability and perpetuity in the aggregate, not every individual unit to be 60%, but in the aggregate to be 60%, which is, I think, the intention.
On average, to be 60% with some flexibility to go as high as 80% for some units.
Well, I mean, the project won't.
I'd rather it be tied to the zoning as opposed to the financing, because maybe they'll get the financing from someone else.
I think we could, Councilmember Whistler, propose some language that would mirror very similarly to the language that we usually use typically for affordable housing, land entitlements. And essentially what I'm hearing, I believe, and I will ask Mr. Nass to correct me if I'm wrong, is that the proposed condition would essentially be that all of the units within the property would be maintained affordable at 80% AMI, with the aggregate of all units being no more than 60% AMI into eternity, basically, for an infinite date.
So my lawyer brain is saying the word should be average instead of aggregate, but that's.
I think that's probably correct.
Yeah.
I have some other questions. So I was in the council chambers when the residents of Lee Walker Heights expressed concerns about the redevelopment of their neighborhood and the concerns they expressed around displacement and forced migration that became a reality. I heard some of the same promises tonight that I heard then, and some of the same realities. And I appreciate owning those. Things like folks not wanting to move their families twice, right? So I get the phasing to address some of that. It still feels like an incredible missed opportunity to build a whole neighborhood with all of the amenities that are needed, that could have been possible with more collaboration. Benefits like minority and women-owned business contracting, renewable energy, environmental impacts like community garden infrastructure. And I could probably imagine having more support for this and for these neighbors if it looked like there was an intention to transfer ownership, if that was desired by the residents, cooperatively, but definitely need to see permanent affordable housing if that's not on the table.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Nash, but is the NCHFA tax credit award limited to rentals?
Yes.
So if you are applying for a tax credit project, which you are, the product must be rentals.
Yeah.
So this home ownership component may come in at a later
At a
phase.
later phase.
And not with this funding in this plan, yeah. So, okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, but any other questions for Dave? Because we might have questions for Will, but.
I think what Kim is also saying, and when there was a failed or missed opportunity to collaborate, we kind of missed the purpose-built elements. But in conversations with you, personal conversations, you said that you would like to maintain some of those pillars. So could you express how you're going to try to maintain that?
Well, that's one reason why I'm struggling a little bit with this sort of rigid affordability across the entire property. Because, you know, if we, and we're open to working with the city, or, oh, I'm open to working with the city, I need to get my board support. And whatever developer the city selects for the Ford Street property, to see how that could be done, you know, in a comprehensive way, and moving some of our units to that property if need be. But if a purpose-built community, if you follow the model of the organization from Atlanta, requires some market rate housing, not just affordable housing. It requires, you know, market rate residents who, you know, pay a standard rent. So I think from the Housing Authority's perspective and our mission, you know, limiting the income levels on our property to 80% is perfectly reasonable, but it's probably not strictly consistent with purpose-built with their model. And I'm happy to agree to it in some form, but I think trying to negotiate it on the spot is a little bit difficult, given that there are, you know, multiple directions that phase 2 could go. But we want to get started with phase 1, and that's our important reason for being here tonight.
And for the timing of your application, you need to know, I think we'll be seeing you again in May, right? Before the application's due for a potential funding request. But does it mess up your timeline if we have to delay this to confer that it doesn't mess anything up with NCHFA or other?
Yeah,
We don't,
talk to us a little bit about your timing.
yeah,
on it.
The full application is due to NCHFA on May 13th, so we need
Right.
zoning approval, funding approval of all local gap funds by that date, by a few days before that, so that we can actually finalize the application and submit it in a timely manner.
So the funding request will come to us May 10th, our next meeting.
Correct.
What would be less stressful for you, for us to try and do this on the fly, or for us to come back at the May 10th with language for both the zoning and deal with the funding then?
So we don't have that option.
We
'cause-
don't?
Not with the zoning, because we have to do it in a
We can't continue it or come back
Is
like
May
others? I mean,
10th, the council meeting? Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. That's
Yes.
when the
May
funding comes in.
13th is the funding,
Oh, okay.
his deadline. Our 10th is our council meeting when we're going to hear a funding. I only know because it's coming through our housing first, but I'm just wondering
We've
if,
done it before, I mean, in terms of
Yeah.
coupling the funding vote and the zoning vote.
and I
mean,
don't want to make a decision tonight that creates a new problem. That's why I'm asking
Yeah.
you.
And I think Brad mentioned that you know, your remedy would be recovery of the funds if it was tied to the funding, but I think, you know, we could put something in there that required some kind of documentation on the land, as whatever we come up with, that seems reasonable for long-term planning for that property. And I guess we could come back and change it later if we decided to change the plan.
I'm hearing that you can continue it if needed.
If we continue
If
it.
we can, right,
Sure.
but then we don't have a time to mess up on the
We're
10th.
down to the wire anyway, that's.
I mean, we could do this on the fly tonight, we just don't want to create a new
I don't,
problem.
I would, my preference would be if you really want to have some language in the zoning that says affordability at a certain level in perpetuity, that we have you bring that back on the 10th for final approval. So that we can work out that language and talk
Well,
about.
if you're comfortable with that, I think that would be easier for you all to sit down and kind of think through
Yeah,
what that should look like.
and talk with you about what you want to see, but yes.
And when do you all have HCD?
Tomorrow.
Oh, okay, so you're gonna have a little more discussion about content then, okay.
We're talking about a financial ask.
Well, and you might have be able to talk more about what the vice mayor's question
Sure.
was about, yeah. Okay, so.
Any other questions
So
for
are
me?
so are we officially continuing it to, that's on
Is it,
the new business?
can we have
Do we need
the
a motion to
public
continue?
hearing now, or do you want to
Yeah,
continue it?
We do need a motion
Yep.
to continue that, Mayor.
Okay,
We're going to continue the public hearing, excuse me for asking questions, or just continue the vote on the final.
You could conduct the public hearing tonight if you
Yeah.
wanted to, but you could just simply continue the full matter, and the public hearing would be conducted at that date as well.
yeah, we don't have anyone signed up for the public hearing tonight. Okay, I mean, I think I would feel more comfortable if we did the public hearing at the next meeting, just in case there's any changes, and we're able to post the B1 conditions ahead of time. So,
I agree. I mean,
I
this
don't
is
know
a
that we-
complicated and
yeah.
yet very important project, so we don't want to adopt language that could create a problem with another funding or entity or application. As long as we're comfortable, then we can assure them that we will take action on the 10th, then it should be okay.
okay, so we'll do the public hearing at the next, May 10th. Okay, so do I have a motion to continue this item to May 10th?
Ms. Gwen, so moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, thank you all. This was a big one, so it was kind of a good chance to discuss it first before we actually vote on it. And Will, you did a great job, so we'll see you back on May 10th. The next hearing, public hearing item C, has been withdrawn permanently, so we don't have any action to take on that item. Again, if anybody new joined us since we started, if you do want to speak at the end of the meeting or under one of these items of new business, please sign up at the front desk. The next item is, we're moving to our new business agenda, an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 fees and charges manual. And I have here that it's either Tony or Taylor. It's Taylor. All right, so Taylor Floyd will be presenting this item.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back again to talk a little more budget here today. I'm going to go over the proposed fees and charges. Overview of our presentation here. We'll talk a little bit about the water rate adjustment, the stormwater utility fee, solid waste fee, and then some other smaller changes that are proposed. So you're probably tired of seeing this slide today, but one more time, we're here on the 26th at the adopting fees and charges. Again, the next time you all will see us to talk about budget will be the manager's proposed budget on May 24th. Just as a reminder, the Fees and charges, most of the fees and charges were recommended by the Finance and Human Resources Committee at their March 22nd meeting on a 3-0 vote that included the water, stormwater, and solid waste fees, as well as again, several other minor changes. Changes to event application and Pack Square Park rental fees were recommended with a 2-to-1 vote of the committee. So a brief overview on the water fee recommendation. This is really a continuation of recovering the revenue that we lost from the capital fee to help maintain the water fund's credit rating and debt service coverage, make sure that they're able to issue the debt that they need to get their projects done. We tried to minimize the burden on customers by spreading that recovery across several fiscal years. And we're recommending an increase to both the volumetric charges as well as the base charges for most customers. And that is a very long list of things, so that is why there is not a slide, but it is in the staff report. On the stormwater, our stormwater system has significant maintenance and capacity needs. We have not increased that fee since fiscal year 1920. And the additional funding generated from this revenue is needed to address existing needs, meet service delivery expectations, and achieve our stated goals. You can see the changes here on a per month basis for each one of the 3 tiers, which are what single family houses or properties pay, and the ERU, equivalent residential units, for non-single family properties. Moving on to sanitation. We have not invested in this core service in several years. The last time a fee increase was approved was FY17. We're really struggling currently to maintain just our existing service level without some additional resources. The staff is recommending a $2 per month increase to the solid waste fee. So again, those 3 of these, all the fee changes that we're proposing are the ones that impact the most of our residents or our community here in the city of Asheville. So we wanted to give you a sense of what that would look like on the bi-monthly utility bill that goes out to property owners or residents. It's a $10.45 increase on that bi-monthly bill, and then for a $62.70 increase overall. And again, that's making an assumption on what we think is the average or user in the city. Any questions about that before I move on to the other fee changes?
Just to clarify, just so that people understand that the water, when they get their bill, they get both water and sewerage. So according to what MSD does with fees in the coming year, the potential is bigger than that for, just because I'm not sure people fully get that they pay 2 different fees on the same bill.
Correct.
They actually pay all
all
the
3,
fees,
yeah.
all of them, so.
Oh, yeah, those are all on.
Yeah, they're all, so one, yeah, so,
Got MSD.
right, I know, a lot of times people get the one bill and they say, I'm paying more for water, but it's, also includes everything else, right?
Yeah, so yes, any increase that MSD approves will be reflected on that bill and is not included in that $10.45 increase for the average user.
I have a question. It
Yes,
looks to me as, when we're looking at single-family residential and multifamily residential versus commercial and manufacturer, I'm curious why we're raising the rates more for residents.
Are we talking about water?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Volumetric charge per CCF.
Yes, so I'm hoping that David Melton's here and can talk about the specifics of that, and he is, I see him back there.
And the spirit of this is that, I mean, folks are struggling to make ends meet as it is. So did we have a side-by-side comparison of what it would look like to raise commercial rates more than residential rates to get to the same outcomes?
Good evening, David Melton, Director of Water Resources. And that's the way our rate structure is presently. And we are going back into the rate structure this year to try to level some of those, level the playing field, if that makes sense.
Level the playing field in favor of commercial over residential?
No, to even it out across everything, so residential isn't paying the lion's share.
We did have a slide that showed a little bit more information about the breakdown of the water rate because we lost the capital piece of it due to the state lawsuit that involved lots and lots of cities. So I thought part of this was a recovery of having to figure out how to manage that loss and restructure it. And our rate actually dropped and we're now kind of bringing it back up. So I don't know that we have right now any that particular in the weeds information to show folks, but it might be helpful to see the context of the history of the water rate.
Sure, and the last time the full rate structure was revisited was like 2010. So where we're at back now is about where we would have been with that old rate structure. And that's why we're diving back in over the next year or so. Does that answer or confuse you more?
It does. I'm still concerned that if we're looking to cover a gap, why it appears that we're sharing the burden when I don't know how we justify increasing water rates on residents right now.
My understanding is, I recall, I'm in the Planning and Economic Development Committee and also involved in commercial management of real estate downtown. I remember thinking commercial goes up as well. So this slide might answer this for us. It's not just residential going up by any means.
Oh, I'm looking at the reports on this. They are all going up. It's just that residential is going up more than commercial. The way that I'm reading it, unless I'm reading it differently, which is why I asked a clarifying why residential would go up. It says current fee is $447, proposed fee, and then the change. And so the change is 30 cents for single family residential. For 1,000 CCF monthly for multifamily residential, it's 16 compared to 30. So if I'm reading the changes wrong, then I'm happy to gain some more understanding around that. But manufacturer rates are lower than residential at every level.
No, I think you're reading it right too. And if you look at our customer base is roughly 92 to 95% residential. So that's where naturally most of the revenue is going to come from. But however, what this is based on is a 6 CCF per 2-month period, which would be what a normal single-family residence would use. Your commercial users use much more. So they're actually paying more even though their rates are lower, if that makes sense.
It
on a
does make
volume
sense.
factor.
And we have a lot of industry that uses a lot of our delicious water resources, both for exporting as a manufactured good and also for cleaning and doing laundry for our tourism industry. And so that's why I'm surprised that we're not putting the burden more on our commercial use.
It's a little bit frustrating that we don't have the information regarding the removal of the capital fee. How much of the bi-monthly fee increase is the restoration of the capital capture?
I don't remember the exact numbers, do you?
Is
I
it?
don't either. But I think, yeah, as David, I think mentioned, I think we are getting back to where we would be a little bit higher than where we were when we had the capital fee in place at this point, which was 2 years ago.
Would we be, we don't know how much though. Of the $4.92, we don't know how much of that.
Yeah, I think the other challenging piece is we're trying to make that revenue up without that capital fee, right? So we're adding it to both the volumetric and base fee charges because that's what we have the ability to charge now, whereas right. So again, it's not quite an apples to apples comparison because we had essentially an additional fee and additional
Well, because we
revenue source.
dropped out the capital.
Correct.
So, to the actual ratepayer, I know we did have this information because I saw a chart that showed our whole overall rate dropping and we're actually just sort of recovering it and then a bit more. So it would be helpful to have that information.
we could certainly provide that, not on the fly, unfortunately. Any other questions about any of the solid waste, stormwater, or water fees? All right, we'll move on to the other proposed fee changes. We have a variety of recommended changes, event application and facility usage, including Peck Square Park, some development-related changes, including to some of our stormwater development fees, noise ordinance enforcement, traffic control, some right-of-way closure adjustments, adding a few opportunities to charge hourly or flat rates in parking lots where those don't currently exist, and then some fees for daily use of metered parking. So that's like if you're closing a metered space for an entire day or longer. One other thing I did want to mention is we did have a few changes since it went to the committee. One is we had some water system development fees that were included initially. We had to take those out primarily because they have some statutorily required steps that we have to go through, so that they didn't really align with the timeline for the rest of our fees. We also removed some fee changes that were proposed to homestay permits, and that's really due to a recent court decision out of Wilmington that, if you have any questions, I'll probably direct to the city attorney. And we also added some changes to parks and recreation facility rentals. Those are primarily a reduction in fees to make it a little more affordable to rent community spaces, and then a small addition for gym floor covering and extending rental hours. So very minor changes there. But those are all things that have changed since we went to Finance and HR Committee. So in summary, any additional revenues from adopted fee changes we will incorporate into the proposed budget that, again, the manager will present on May 24th, and those changes will be effective July 1st, 2022.
Taylor, since we did not have a unanimous decision at the Finance Committee meeting on the one particular fee, can you give us just a little bit more depth on that fee, like when the last time was we increased it, et cetera, et cetera? Because I think that it might give a little bit more understanding of.
And I'm going to ask John Fillman to come speak to that, the expert from our Office of Special Events.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is John Fillman. I'm with the Department of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities, and I'm the Outdoor Special Event Manager. How can I answer your questions?
I think it was the downtown event fees that did not, that we didn't get unanimity at the Finance and HR Committee meeting. Can you just go into a little bit more depth as to what those fees were, since, it wasn't across the board?
Sure. So the reason that our office is proposing a fee increase for Peck Square Park is that we're recommending to move all special event fees for public space under our new department. Prior to that, Parks and Recreation was the department responsible for setting the fees for parks, and I was part of that department at the time that fee for Peck Square Park was originally established back in 2007. And so in being that this is our first year to have the opportunity to recommend an increase, we did some research with comparable cities and found that the Peck Square Park property was underpriced as far as our comparables. And so that's why we recommended the fee at this time rather than a previous year, as this is our first opportunity to do that. I also wanted to point out that while these increases are ranging from in rates that exceed 100% in some cases, Council adopted a 75% discount to all nonprofit organizations on city fees for property use and permitting earlier this year. And that was a part of a program previously that is not currently being the 75% discount was part of a program that we don't currently have in effect. So by adding that 75% to fees and charges, it makes it a standard fee that can be applied until it's removed. And that makes the increase in facility use fees fairly palatable for most of the users of the park. Roger McGuire Green, for a nonprofit, would see an increase of $75 for the first 3 hours and $25 each additional hour. And the other sections of the park, the terrace and the square, would see an increase in $25 for 3 hours and $6.25 each additional hour for the nonprofit organizations that use it. Currently, those rates are $25 for the first 3 hours as a standard rate. So then most people renting the square and the terrace are paying $6 and some cents per hour for that use as a nonprofit. And so that does double their fees, but it only really brings that up to about $12 or $13 per hour for those spaces. And it only brings the park, the Roger McGuire Green section, to $50 per hour instead of $25 per hour.
And thank you for that. And also, I don't know when you gave this presentation, or someone gave this presentation a couple years ago, talking about how popular our parks are, and we want people to use the parks, but maybe we want a little bit more used by just people kind of walking through, and just a little bit less formal use of the parks and more, and so that they're more available to our residents just on a daily basis. And I thought part of the thinking around raising these fees is we don't want this to be like the absolute cheapest opportunity for anybody within 50 miles. And that's some of your research indicated that.
Right, that's correct. Fee increases are a common demand management strategy, and that's why we're proposing those fees. Not solely.
Much better articulated than what I said.
It is one way that we can help do that.
I was the lone vote when we're talking about event fees, and I'll share that that comes from a position of having heard from the nonprofits in downtown. And much like we froze some initiatives during the pandemic and said, like parking, for example, this just isn't the time. It's a similar sentiment as the events come back. And then if you were, paying attention to the news and stuff, you saw like the city market downtown face some other issues. And then what was it last week? The Hemp Fest faced some other issues. So what we're seeing here is that it's just a challenge to get the events back online. It's a staffing thing. It's an APD resource thing. It's a bollards thing. It's a bike racks thing. It's all over the place. So this was just one more layer that hurt. So I wanted to speak up for them, but I understand that I may be the only one concerned.
I also would like to just add a comment for anyone listening that these fees would, if adopted by council, would not take effect until fiscal year 22-23, and we currently have a 10-month advance window for applications. So anyone that would like to avoid the increase and has an event within 10 months of June 30th is welcome to apply and still maintain that current fee structure.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, I found the water information, thanks to Sage. So it looks like the bi-monthly charge, so the way this presentation breaks it down, it basically says we went way down in FY21. From FY20, we went way down to FY21 because we had to eliminate the capital fee. And last year we rebounded somewhat, but not even to the level of FY20. This would bring us above FY20, but the rate, the way I calculate it is that instead of being $29.52 annual increase for this average household model you select, it would be $17.76 is the way I calculate over where we were, but where we once were with the capital fee. So, I mean, that's a little bit hard to explain to folks because they're going to get an increase they're going to get somewhat of an increase in their water bill, but they got a decrease. So yeah, so that's a little bit challenging to
And when we
explain.
talked about
Maybe we
this-
can put some information in the water bill like we do sometimes, explaining a little bit of the history of the bill fees so that folks understand what's happening there.
And I do want to correlate, fees and water work and North Fork Dam and all these things and how we don't have any brown water calls anymore. If you remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were really struggling with that. So what you're seeing is us, I'm sorry, knock on wood, everybody.
No, but.
But I'm just reminding us of the crisis we were in, right? And this is somewhat.
Well, we finished, the massive project with the North Fork Dam and there's a lot of water line work to do, but that was significant. The cost was something like $50 million. So we've done a lot of improvement to the water system and I
will say are planning some additional improvements with the advanced metering project. That's going to be a really large project, basically touching every single meter in the city. And will probably take some time to complete. But once that's done, I think that will also provide some really significant benefits, both to customers and operationally, as David discussed. I think that was at the budget retreat. Any other questions? I think with that, then ask a motion to approve the proposed fees and charges.
Are you making the motion? No. Folks, we don't have anyone signed up to speak under this item, so I will entertain a motion unless you all have any other questions for staff. Brad, you look like you want to say something. Nope? Okay. Okay, just prepare, all right. Crickets, I need a motion.
I'm pulling it up. I'm happy to.
Okay.
Motion to approve an ordinance amending the fees and charges manual for the fiscal year 2022, 2023.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the next item under new business is a resolution to approve the City of Asheville 2022 legislative short session agenda and direction of City Attorney to provide this to our local delegation. And this is the annually, mass exodus, sorry, thank you. Fees and charges, folks. This is the City Council's legislation agenda, if you will. Kind of our request list to the legislature of legislation that we would like to see passed that supports our city specifically, and sometimes some of this legislation affects lots of other cities. I do have, and Brad can go through each item here in just a minute. I do have a request from Councilwoman Kilgore to consider one of the items separately, so that may be a possibility. Well, that is a possibility to do that. We were planning on voting on it all as one slate, but we can pull an item out that just sort of like we do our consent agenda. So Brad, take it away in terms of talking about these items.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to all of the council. As you said, Mayor, this is our chance as we approach the upcoming short session of the North Carolina General Assembly to essentially provide to our local delegation those items of legislative wish list material that we would like for them to either support or those items which we would request opposition to. Generally speaking, the City Council has not always adopted this, but we have prior to the previous long session. Some of the items that are on the short session proposed legislative agenda are holdovers that were approved by the council during the long session legislative agenda, which have not reached a full conclusion, so they remain on the list today. The upcoming short session is supposed to begin taking effect on May 18th, so this will be our last opportunity to provide input prior to a May 9th deadline for any specific sort of local legislation that we'd like. After speaking with council and providing information and getting feedback from the governance committee, we've put together a proposed 7 items on the legislative agenda, and I'm going to briefly go over those quickly with council now. And I'll do it by number so that if any individual member of council would like to have an item pulled off, they can refer to it by that number. Number one on the proposed agenda is a request to support legislation that would reform the local occupancy tax utilization. We've broken this down a little more specific to include a request specifically to alter the percentage that is utilized either for tourism and increase that percentage that can be utilized for other local projects, and also increase the sort of scope of those items beyond simply capital expenditures as it exists right now. And finally, a request to expand the potential membership to include some additional tourism-related industries that are currently not represented. The second item on the agenda, on the proposed agenda, I should say, is a request to oppose legislation that would place any limits on reasonable regulation locally for short-term rental use of residential property. We have seen a few of those bills in the past session, and as rents continue to rise at an all-time high, we believe this is absolutely necessary for local governments to maintain some ability to regulate those effects locally. Item number 3 is a request to support state and local reparations efforts. As council may remember, on July 14th of 2020, this council passed a resolution in support of reparations, and a request was included in that for both state and federal cooperative efforts. So we have asked, as part of this legislative agenda, for state level support, either through legislation or funding efforts. Item number 4 is a request to support new legislation and specific state level funding to encourage and support the development of affordable housing. As have most municipalities been utilizing their ARPA funds, the state has also received ARPA funds. That is one, but not the only potential funding source which could be applied to this particular item. So we'd request that the state give consideration to its ARPA funding to address this increasingly important problem. Item number 5 on the proposed agenda would be a request to give authority to local governments to conduct a referendum for a 1/4 cent sales tax specific to transit. As I think has already been mentioned in our previous budget work session, the county of Buncombe, as does many counties, already have the ability to impose such a referendum to determine whether or not this tax would be levied. This is the extremely common and most common way that transit systems are funded throughout the state. There are no models currently which would allow a city-specific sales tax of this nature, and this bill was actually floated during the previous long session, but it remains in the committee at present. Item number 6 would be a request to support state funding to provide a cost of living increase for members of the local government employees retirement system. This is funded entirely by municipalities, and in large part, the cost of living increases have been very few and far between over the past several years. And those members who have entered the pension system have seen no increases for several years. We would ask that the state give consideration to providing some additional funding in order to effectuate that. Finally,
it's funded by cities for retired city employees.
Exactly, thank you.
Thank you,
Mayor.
The state.
The final item on the agenda would be a request to give authority to conduct electronic or virtual meetings. This is something that has never been specifically provided to North Carolina local governments until the pandemic. And during the state of emergency, the legislature did allow for cities to conduct virtual meetings only during the state-declared state of emergency. We would request that that authority be given permanently to municipalities so that local decisions could be made about when those circumstances would arise where it would be beneficial for the body or the community as a whole to have such a virtual meeting. That is the totality of our proposed agenda. I'm happy to answer any questions about any individual items that you have.
Well, I would like to request that item 5 be removed from the
1/4 cent sales tax.
Yeah, from the legislative request. I feel that basically Buncombe County already has the referendum to do it. I think that to put that burden on just the city of Asheville municipality, I think we really should look at alternative measures for this particular cost or expense. Thank you.
And on that note, we didn't add language about this, but we could. Instead of property taxes being the go-to for funding transit, sales taxes can capture revenue from our visitors, and we can exclude groceries, gas, and prescription medication. So perhaps we should name that explicitly so that we're saying we don't want folks to pay more sales taxes at the grocery store, the gas pump, and around their essential medication. Since that's allowed in the state, I suggest we say it explicitly.
Under the sales tax for transit item.
Correct.
It still would have the impact of the small business people who basically, it's a sales and use tax. So basically, the use part, it can affect a lot of businesses, especially small business people.
Am I mistaken, but isn't the point of the referendum to put it on the ballot for folks to decide? So it's not our levying, it would be to present it to the community for a vote to determine if that's something that the broader community would support.
That is correct. The way that the county-specific statute is written is that it gives the governing body the ability to place a referendum on the ballot for whether or not to levy the sales tax.
There's very few things in North Carolina that you can hold a referendum on. And not every county, I believe, can even have a referendum on a sales tax for transit. We happen to be one of them, but this would just be requesting the authority on a citywide level rather than a countywide level, which already exists, to be able to ask the voters whether or not they approve of such a sales tax increase, a 1/4-cent sales tax increase.
I have a curiosity around this, because I hadn't considered it yet, is that if we got permission to do it specifically within the city limits, could we then put it on a ballot? Or does it?
That's what it calls for.
Right.
That's what this calls for.
So it would still be
It would
on the
still
ballot.
require a vote, yes.
Right, just
Yeah.
clarifying. 'Cause I know we were asking special permission. While we're asking special permission, we could also ask the permission of the voters.
And the countywide sales tax for transit has passed in Orange, Durham, Mecklenburg, Wake, I believe. So anyway, the thought here was that we have a city transit system, so wouldn't it be great if we could limit the request to the city residents for the sales tax?
And what I was thinking, and I actually was thinking that because we do need to expand transit to Buncombe County to make it effective, because it's just not really effective locally. And since Buncombe County already have this right to do this, I think we could probably, if anyone's going to be paying this type of tax, I think we could do a lot better with the tax is charged to all Buncombe County as opposed to Asheville just bearing a burden for this transit system locally.
I would love to think that a whole county would support transit for the city, but it's a maybe.
So I think what we can do is we can just vote on the rest of the slate without that item and vote on that item separately, if that would help.
Yes.
So
Does this doesn't weaken, I mean, this document goes where? Like, we're hopeful that legislators will
this
pick
is
it
an
up and
important
read it
document.
tonight, right?
This isn't, no.
They're watching right now.
Yeah, well, look, we have incrementally ticked away at some of our asks. For example, an elected school board did happen this last session, so, but it is, I think you make a good point, that the legislature this session is voicing very loudly that they plan to meet for 20 days, and so they're not going to do too much work, but we do have one item that is pending in addition to the sales tax item. We do have an item pending in the legislature right now, which is it's the Tourism Development Authority's enabling legislation to be amended to change the percentage from 25% to 33% of the room tax funds, which is now projected, 33% is projected to be about $13 million, to be able to be used not just for capital, but for other uses, provide more flexibility with that spending. But you'll notice that our ask talks about 50%. Because as a committee, the governance committee discussed, we feel like at that point, given how much money the room tax is projected to be this year, which is $40 million, that is more than enough money for the Tourism Development Authority to use for marketing and tourism. And we'd like to see at least half of that money used on projects that serve the whole community. So we have that ask in here. We know that we're butting up against the committee guidelines in the legislature, which they're only guidelines, they're not law, they don't have to be followed, but what they call for is a 33-66 split rather than a 50% split.
And to add to that, we're so far behind in our infrastructure needs. And I would just remind folks that the members of the TDA are our neighbors, and they see those infrastructure deficits as well. So I would appeal to not just have council support for a 50% split, but among our partners that could help to advance this decision.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adopt the legislative agenda without the sales tax item?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and I don't have anyone signed up to speak under this item, so I'm going to move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then do I have a motion to adopt specifically the sales tax for transit item?
Mayor, would that include Councilwoman Roney's addition regarding the exclusion of the grocery items?
Grocery, gas,
Yeah.
and
Prescription medication.
prescription medication.
I make a motion including the language around the exclusions allowed at the state level.
Okay, do I have a motion?
That was the motion.
Oh, sorry, yes, that was a motion. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Okay, we have adopted the legislative agenda. And finally, under new business, we have a resolution amending the assignment of the real estate contracts for property on 150 Riverford Parkway to Shangri-La Industries, Inc. by waiving the reimbursement of $79,500 in due diligence costs for the purposes of creating permanent supportive housing. And Nikki Reed is here.
Great.
Talk to us about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Nikki Reed with the Community and Economic Development Department. So last year, the city had entered into a contract to purchase the real estate mentioned there. At the time when we were under contract, the city expended funds, including some due diligence fees that include the appraisal, phase 1 survey, as well as option fees to the seller. Those were costs incurred as part of our real estate process. On December 14th, the decision was made that rather than the city pursue that real estate transaction and actually purchase the real estate, instead the city opted to assign its real estate contract to Shangri-La. And Shangri-La's explicit purpose was to redevelop the property in partnership with Step Up for 100+ units of permanent supportive housing. Now, in that real estate assignment, we negotiated a reimbursement of costs, so a reimbursement of those initial due diligence costs. That was included in that assignment as part of that transaction. So that was where we have been. Where we are currently is we had hoped to see that closing happen on March 31st. But instead, we've been working in partnership with Shangri-La, the seller, and with Step Up to really oversee this transaction because we have such a vested interest in seeing this permanent supportive housing in our community. But we have learned that a full environmental assessment is needed. This is often called a NEPA. We had looked to do a categorical exclusion, but instead we received guidance from HUD that a full environmental assessment was needed. And so that information came in March as we were looking to close. And so with that, a delay in the timeline was noted, just really to respond to the need to provide HUD with a full environmental assessment. So that being the case, the buyer and seller were negotiating on what that real estate extension would look like. That ultimately translated into more costs for the buyer, Shangri-La. So and that being the case, they have come to the city seeking the ability to waive those reimbursement costs as a way to assuage some of those additional fees that are incurred because of the real estate delay. So with that, Staff wanted to present this tonight as an option for council to consider to waive those reimbursement costs as a way to continually support this project to achieve the permanent supportive units. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but otherwise turn it over to the mayor.
This is Kim. So I have a question about if we didn't approve the reimbursal, which fund would that impact and in what way?
If I'm hearing correctly, the initial reimbursement costs were paid for out of the Affordable Housing CIP funds, and so we were expecting to get reimbursed in that line item.
So if we kept things the way they were, our Affordable Housing CIP would be reimbursed that amount. So we
Right.
would gain that amount.
We'd
Okay,
gain
thank
that
you.
back.
Nikki, do you see any other, I mean, this is a pretty big stumbling block, I get it, but do you see any other stumbling blocks for this deal to go through? And, are they going to be able to deal with the additional potential 200?
The earnest money deposit.
Yeah, whatever
yeah.
these other costs that they're incurring as a result of this new requirement.
All the feedback that we're getting from Shangri-La is that they are very committed to seeing this through. And so the good news too is that because we had already performed some of the environmental work when we were pursuing the categorical exclusion, it seems as if the environmental assessment is going to come back without any issues. So we are working on that assumption that the environmental assessment will be successful and that HUD will approve it. It's really just a matter of this timing and how long it's actually taking to get it through. So that's the major hurdle, honestly, is the timeline, ensuring that the seller remains committed to the deal as well, and just seeking that final HUD approval.
I just want to voice one concern, and that is to look back on what it was the community was concerned about when we were voting on this. And one of the concerns that was frequently in my inbox was, what happens if Shangri-La or this buyer, whomever it may be, comes back for additional monies because they can't do what they're saying they're doing? And here we are, we haven't even closed and they're asking for money. It's a little alarming because these processes should be known by experienced developers. So I'm a little taken back by the sudden request. And at this point, we've transferred the purchase contract to this buyer. So it's a buyer and seller arrangement right now. And here they are coming back to the city to help with their buyer-seller arrangement. It makes me a little uncomfortable.
Same.
And if we're out of it, we should be out of it. And are we saying this for-profit entity can't afford $79,500 when they've been assigned very valuable property?
Well, one of the things maybe you're not explaining to us is in the context of a commercial real estate deal. I thought within an assignment that these sort of costs would have been maybe taken care of and assigned. I'm not really sure. Tell us why this would be an appropriate ask in this context.
So when we pursued the acquisition of the Ramada in the first place, these were sunk costs. So we were not expecting to receive these back at all. So I think the fact that we were able to negotiate that initially was a good thing. But I think where we are now, the ability to waive is just another signal of partnership with this organization because of the need to have permanent supportive units in the community.
But again, it's being driven by a need for an extension. I would also, in normal times, it's great to get a NEPA study back in like 60 days, but those are normal times. I don't know if they're going to be able to get anything done in normal time. So what I'm reading here is that the extension means that the seller of the hotel is going to charge a per rate fee to the buyer because they can no longer host hotel visitors. To me, that's just a buyer-seller issue. I'm not unsympathetic because we do want this permanent supportive housing in our community. But how we set this deal up is, it's just should stay how we set it up.
I think in my analysis, and the reason why I thought to bring it to council tonight is that if the deal doesn't happen, we don't get those funds anyway. So to be able to demonstrate partnership was really why I'm here.
That's a very good point.
She's right.
That's a very good point.
Nick is right. Regardless, we would have lost the money anyway if we didn't have anyone to transfer it to. So it's just really a wash, more or less. And
Well, no, we would have saved because we wouldn't have committed $1.5 million. So we would have been out of 79,500 versus 1.5 million.
But we wouldn't have had 100, 80, 100 units for veterans or affordable housing?
Well, we don't know that to be the case. They could have negotiated amongst themselves and we could have been out of it.
But we're too far into.
No, we're not too far in.
I
Because we're not in it
what-
at all.
Well, with any commercial deal, I mean, which Nikki knows, there's so many unknowns. And this was something that they did not expect. And unfortunately, commercial extensions or sometimes contracts go for years. So this is not unusual. Huh?
But, so Councilwoman Kilgore, and you're our real estate agent, so do you find that usually goes back to, we're not even a third party to this deal anymore?
Yeah, I do realize that, but we actually, who brought them to the table anyway for us? So you brought them, right? Yes, that's what I'm saying. So basically, we didn't go out and look for them, so I'm just
No,
saying.
actually, my understanding is that we had someone in one department reach out to one of his friends and said, let's make a deal.
Well, see,
And
that's
within
what I'm
10
saying.
days, we said, yeah, let's go ahead and
that's
do
what I'm
it.
saying. So basically, whoever initiated this, they sort of, I mean.
Nikki,
So is the point
I
that
have a
we messed
question.
up at the beginning, so let's go ahead and mess up now?
I have a question for you about process and timing. Would it be possible for us to shelve this request pending closing on the property so that the concern about, well, are there going to be further asks? Are there going to be further issues? I mean, I want to work in partnership with this. I really think it's important for our community to see additional permanent supportive housing units brought online in our community. I mean, if we're going to work to address homelessness and bring an end to homelessness, we've got to bring online permanent supportive housing that allows, this is designed specifically for people to transition out of homelessness. So to me, it's a valued project and I really want to see it go forward, but I hear the concerns about, well, they haven't closed yet, we're still kind of in this, maybe it's going to take this long, maybe it's not. I mean, is there a way to sort of signal to them that we would like to see it finished, see it closed, and then hear the totality of the request? Hopefully it's nothing more than this, but then we would know that for sure.
I guess that would leave the opportunity open for that seller and buyer to negotiate a different rate for daily fees and so on. I mean.
And that's what I'm trying to think through is that we are somewhat at a very pivotal point in this project. So I don't know what would happen if we don't have support tonight. So it's a little difficult to say.
Okay, you're telling us if you want this project to happen, don't send negative signals. If
Exactly.
you don't want the project to happen, send your negative
Yeah,
signal.
I
But
agree.
if you do want it to happen, this would be an important step.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, understood. Okay, so.
So what would the impact be of, we can't put everything on our May 10th agenda, but could this be on our May 10th agenda?
And no one's here from you're doing this on their accord, thank you, but they're not here, huh? Neither the seller nor the buyer.
No, and so I'm not sure if I understand why the delay would be important.
So if we see other issues come up between now and then.
I guess we could support it with a clear indication that it may not be supported next time.
Well, this is what I'm trying to figure out.
And that's what I asked Nikki before we put this on this agenda. Nikki, they can't be coming back asking
Yeah.
for anything
else.
else.
Yeah.
And this isn't an addition. It's essentially waiving the reimbursement
Yeah.
of our sunk costs.
Yeah.
That we did our own due diligence.
Exactly.
Because we were going to be the
Yes.
buyer of that particular hotel.
Sort of confused with, because people keep saying, are they coming back? Are they coming back? We don't know if they're coming back, and if they came back, then of course, then, maybe our decision would be different. But you've got to understand too, that these investors actually have probably spent more money in doing a lot of other due diligence things, expenses that they've incurred. So if they could I can understand why they would ask for this, because it was something that we would have paid anyway. So I don't see a problem with it, but.
But I think to underscore the city manager's point, right, we were not intending to bring any further funding requests back. This was it, right? So either we would proceed knowing that the EA was the final hurdle to clear, or the project would fall through, and we would move on accordingly in that regard as well.
So I'll go ahead and say I happen to be a commercial litigation attorney. And it's not so much that they can't afford to do this. We would like to send a message is what I'm hearing. But do we cost our housing trust funds to send a message to a for-profit that can afford to do this?
Well, and I don't want to confuse things, but we were explicitly asked if the city could participate in these costs. And this was the way, when we discussed the ability for the city to participate, this was the way that we found we could. And given the fact that it was sunk cost, it seemed something that was worthwhile considering. So I do want to be clear that that was the ask.
So it's forgiveness of funds already expended.
It's money that would not return to us that we expected in our, it's not our housing
Right.
trust fund, it's close as our CIP for housing, but Nikki, I'm coming around on this because I can hear you say, and I know I trust your experience, that this deal may not happen if we don't do this. So what want to move my thinking into is, how can we, if we do support this, can we add some language that clarifies we don't want to see asks again? And that's maybe a Brad question. I'm not directing that at you, but.
Well, I mean, I think we can relay that through Nikki. She'll be
I'm
talking to
happy to
them.
take that back for sure, because it's very clear to me that we're ready to see this happen is what the message has been. And this was again, I'm doing the work of saying, well, if it doesn't close, we're not getting these funds back. You know, prior to December, when we had even contemplated assigning this to Shangri-La, these were sunk costs that we would never have gotten back. So for me, it was worth it to bring it forward for consideration.
And also, Nikki, the idea of losing this project, right? Because pretty much the community actually have sort of settled in on this. And I think if this particular deal, we lose it behind not trying to, be supportive in some way, then the chances of that ever being affordable, supportive housing will never happen again. So.
Who's to say, right? I don't believe without the city's support through this, the supportive services element, which is the 1.5 million in funding, I don't think we would see that as permanent supportive housing there.
Yeah, okay. Unless anybody else has a comment, I'm going to recognize Gwen for a motion.
Thank you. I know we have one public comment here, but I'd make a motion to amend the assignment of the real estate contracts for property on the 148 to 150 Riverford Parkway to Shangri-La Industries Inc. by waiving the reimbursement of $79,500 in due diligence costs for the purposes of creating permanent supportive housing.
I'll second Sandra.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We do have one person signed up to speak, Jonathan Wainscott.
Thanks. I'm glad that this has given me the opportunity to just talk about what a sloppy deal this was from the very beginning. And I do think that it is a greedy ask for them to comb through the costs now after the fact. There should have been something that they should have thought about in the first place. I think that what they've been given, as Ms. Mosley said, this happened in 6 to 10 days of just some quick phone calls. It's hard for me to see a whole lot of due diligence in the process in the first place. And I'm sure that because this happened so fast for Shangri-La, this is just sort of a bonus fee that they should be paying because it got fast-tracked through the process to begin with. And as you're saying, basically we're going to take this out of our treasured affordable housing fund and pay these guys back. It is the model of their profitability. They have to get money from us, the government, or somewhere else. They're not getting it from their clients. This is such a horrible model of how we can do things. It's obviously ripe for corruption. It's been sloppy from the very beginning. And I think it's, sending a message is important that we're not going to do this. We're not going to negotiate in these ways. I hope that obviously, Ms. Mosley, I can see that you're going to be consistent on not supporting this project, the way that it went down, and continue to do that. And I hope that some other people might consider that the way that this went down originally, to support this is just a continuation of a bad process to begin with. And that this is your opportunity to maybe be contrite and back away from this horrible decision in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, council. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
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 Yes. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand.
And I'll just add.
Did you
this
get,
is-
I'm sorry, did you get that, Maggie? It was 5-2? Or 3? Oh, Sage, you voted against as well? Okay.
This is Kim. For me, it would have been a stronger signal of partnership if a representative of Shangri-La had been present for this appeal.
And I'm really struggling with taking our lost CIP money to give it to a hotelier for daily rates. And that's why I chose that way. I do respect this ask, and I do hope that this project continues, but I really struggled with that piece.
Well, I guess I have concerns about whether or not we're committed to addressing homelessness in our community. I think we've tried to look at various ways to do that, and I guess maybe this council will need to have a more in-depth discussion about what we think is our lane in terms of that work. Because if it's not supporting permanent supportive housing, that needs to be clear, because to me, I thought that was a direction we wanted to move in.
That's a red herring, Mayor. It's not a matter of not supporting permanent supportive housing. I'm just not in favor of bad deals. To me, this is a bad deal. I don't think it would come to an end if we didn't go this way. We don't have to bend over every time someone asks just because we appreciate the broader concern. So I don't want to be painted in a corner for not supporting permanent supportive housing. I don't like the way this came up. We did it too quickly, in my opinion. We looked sloppy, in my opinion. I feel that my original gut instinct was correct, because here we are today because we didn't do the appropriate due diligence early enough.
Well, and I appreciate that. I mean, I have found that, unfortunately, with these land deals, I mean, and Nikki can confirm this, we've had several instances where unexpected issues come up and we're asked to address them. I guess I heard staff saying tonight that this project was in jeopardy if we didn't support this ask. We're talking about money we've already spent, we'll lose if this deal doesn't go through. So, I don't know what to say about it. This is our first, other than Days Inn, which is, Days Inn is an interesting situation with Homeward Bound. The level of subsidy needed to support Homeward Bound in that effort is a magnitude greater than this. So I guess for me to find an entity that knows how to do this work, makes investments in properties, and offers voucher-based permanent supportive housing, seems like something we don't as far as I know in my research of properties that are voucher-based housing, privately owned voucher-based housing in Asheville, they are not necessarily locally owned. They are these national entities, and that's the business they're in. So I guess this is a little bit disappointing, because I think it's a specialty area. We're asking our staff to kind of be experts in all things and advise us appropriately. And so, I want to make the smartest decision. I don't want to blow up this opportunity if we lose it. But maybe, I guess maybe this is our negotiating style or something. we all, sounds like there's collective agreement about the need for permanent supportive housing, but to what extent we make an effort in that direction is of disagreement.
Well, in our defense, I mean, this is a new model in our community, both Days Inn and Ramada.
Well, I mean, it's not new, but
But it is something that we are exploring differently and investing in and using
Yes,
rescue
our
monies
role in
towards.
it-
Yes,
our role in it is
that's
new.
correct. So I don't want us to leave here feeling like we've done a horrible job, because we are. I mean, this is an ongoing, changing environment. We're doing what we can. I think we all very much are concerned about the unhoused and are doing as much as we can across all fronts. So I'm not going to beat ourselves up over this. I think I'll be curious to see where this lands the deal, and I do hope it continues, but, you know, let's give ourselves a little grace. We're trying to figure this out as best we can.
Okay, yep, all right, those were unusual post-voting comments there, thank you, sorry. I was trying to figure out what happens next. Okay, thank you, Nikki. All right, so we have reached the end of our agenda, and now is the time for public comment. We do, council, have a closed session after this, so folks, if you're signed up to speak, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Our city clerk, Maggie, will be keeping the time. She has a high-tech cell phone that she uses that will ding when it's time's up. So I will begin in order of folks who are signed up. The first person signed up to speak is David Rogers.
Hello, Council. I'm David Rogers from the Grace community. I'm here to talk with you about Jones Park. The Jones Park Playground was a treasured asset built as a public-private collaboration with donated money and resources in 1999. The City of Asheville helped with the construction of the playground and provided maintenance for the first 5 years. The City of Asheville logo is on the sign, signifying this partnership with the school. On August 23rd of 2021, Asheville City Schools Superintendent and staff continued this relationship with the city in having a meeting with Asheville Parks and Recreation staff, along with Peggy Rowe, discussing the Jones Park playground removal. The next day, ACS announced that they told us about this meeting and the plan to tear down the playground with the intent to rebuild when the funds are available. We have quotes to rebuild the Jones Park playground with similar equipment as Tempe Avery Park in Montford for around $300,000. The City of Asheville has a relationship with this vendor, and the budgeted maintenance of Tempe Avery in years 1 through 10 per year is $1,500. In years 11 through 20, maybe $3,500 to $5,000. Maintenance costs are low with the materials and warranties that they have. We have pledges of more than $311,000 to build a new playground. The Asheville City Schools Foundation has agreed to provide fiscal agency once approval to rebuild and long-term maintenance is set. Asheville City Schools leaders that I met with last week support getting the playground rebuilt with donated funds if Asheville Parks and Rec will commit to maintaining the playground. The ACS leaders I met with were the superintendent, board chair, vice chair, attorney, and executive director of finance. All support getting this done. They don't have the finances to take care of it. The Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods has sent you a letter of support urging you to commit to providing long-term maintenance of what is essentially a city park. In an email from one of you all, you told me how when a city gets programming time on facilities that they do not own, it's customary that the city provides maintenance in exchange for this use. I would suggest that the programming time at Jones Park Playground or the utilization rate is more than 90% as a city park. As such, it doesn't seem like too much to ask for the city to spend a very small sum each year to maintain this. It's a huge win for the city and all of us that have used this playground for decades. No tax dollars will be needed to be spent to rebuild the playground. The school is offering to sign a long-term lease with the city for possibly just $1 a year. Where else can the city get land like this for $1? There was a sign on the Jones Park playground that said, quote, "There's a unique partnership between Asheville City Schools and the City of Asheville," end quote. We really need this partnership to continue. There's no way that a private entity can maintain a playground. If Asheville, the City of Asheville, is spending $1.5 million to partner with a private school, I hope that you can do this with our public school that's actually in the city limits. Thanks.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Susan Dixon.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Susan Dixon. I live in West Asheville, and I thank you for the privilege to speak to you regarding our popular and fast-growing sport, pickleball. We're all crazy about this sport, and it's the fastest growing sport in the nation. Our community of players is growing very fast as more people move to Asheville. Not to mention the visitors who query us on all, even as recently as today, about where they can go to play pickleball. Our sport is easy to learn. It's socially engaging. We have people from all walks of life, all different ages, racially diverse, and it's great exercise. I typically clock 2.5 miles on my Apple Watch in a 2-hour session. That's good exercise. Many of us come from other sports, tennis, table tennis, other sports. Many of us come from no sport, and the addiction is the same across the board. I'll tell you, it's our crack. Our sessions tend to consist of 12 to 50 players at a time. Most days when I play at Oakley and Montford, which are the main courts that we play at, we have people playing, we have people on the sidelines waiting to play, and yet there's a court that sits vacant at Oakley the majority of the time. Or sometimes there's 2 tennis players on it. Meanwhile, we've got dozens of players. For your information, 1 tennis court affords 2 pickleball courts. So, and we have 4 players per pickleball court. So that's 8 players per tennis court. 16 players going in one session, while there's many more than that waiting on the sidelines. What has become obvious for us who play numerous days a week, is that adjacent unmarked court is unused the majority of the time. Sometimes it's only 2 players on it, as I said, and yet tennis players have far more court options in the city than we do. When visitors come to Asheville, like I said, just this morning, a woman came, we were playing, she came from Florida and said, how do I play? How do I find out? So we told her that here in Asheville, we have the Playtime Scheduler website. Go to that and sign up for games. And she said, you mean you don't have dedicated courts here? We said, no, most cities now do. And towns much smaller than us, we hear it a lot. I am here to support both pickleball and tennis players. We both have the right to be part of the city parks and recreation. I'm asking that the city take a serious evaluation of the number of dedicated pickleball courts versus the number of dedicated tennis courts. I think you might be surprised.
Thank you. Is that our new timer? You changed your time there. Okay, I'm just confused. Right.
I'm timed out.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think it's a gift. We want to know, do we get to keep the ball? No, okay, all right, okay, thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Sexton.
Yeah, we should have given you an orange one. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Sexton, and I am living at 34 Cedar Summit. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in America. As of the end of 2021, over 4.8 million people enjoyed pickleball. It's consistently grown in the last 3 years, a total growth of 34%. In spite of COVID, the growth rate last year was 39.3%. This is an incredible sport for both physical and mental health. We are in the South Atlantic region. It's the largest number of pickleball players in the country at 924,000. Asheville's pickleball community is also experiencing exponential growth. Currently, we have over 800 citizens who play on a regular basis, and I mean several times a week. Susan mentioned Playtime Scheduler. We are 4th in the nation of how many people are using this app to organize and get together to play games. What this says is there are a lot of people looking to play pickleball in Asheville. We're seeing a large number of citizens waiting on the sideline, like Susan said. There's just not enough courts. We find pickleball courts that are not painted, tennis courts that are not painted with pickleball lines that are sitting idle while we have 50 people on the sides waiting to participate. It saddens me. It appears that Asheville is behind the times on this growing sport, and we're not getting listened to for the needs of these citizens who are just trying to stay healthy. I get concerned when I hear, like I was on the court today, and the woman from Florida said, "What do you mean I have to bring my own net?" Can you imagine if you were a tennis player and you walked around carrying your net? My net is 43 pounds that I carry to the court every day. We're asking for your help in getting dedicated pickleball courts so that we're no longer having to lug those nets or tell citizens sort of an unwelcoming thing, or tourists an unwelcoming thing of, we're not prepared for you. You brought your paddle along, but you need to carry your net. We're also asking the Parks and Recreation Department to post signage because there is tension on the courts right now. We're partnering with them. We would love to see multi-use courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys are new, so we have a no clapping rule, but forget it. All right, I know. So my next person signed up to speak is Christina Dupuck? Okay. Dupush. I was way off there. Okay.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. As you can tell, all of us in orange are representing your pickleball community tonight. My name is Christina, and I'm a local resident. And, I want to say on behalf of the pickleball community, it is heart-wrenching to really take note of your meeting tonight, to really listen to the issues this city and county and world faces. And I will tell you, as a group of people that has been gathering to try to get organized and to build a relationship I'll talk about in just a moment, I think out of respect to all of you and to the citizens of need, we want to be very respectful to come into this room and to talk about pickleball. Because in talking to Dee, who I've had a chance to meet and talk with a couple of times, and we're very excited for your new leadership in the Parks and Rec Department here in Asheville, and Wayne, who has also joined you, and we see a great potential there for relationship and growth and to build a vision with you. But I think we do really want to take a moment and just really be humbled by, I don't know if we're crazy or really smart or stupid or what we are to come up here and talk to you about pickleball, but yet we have a need. And I think what I hope you will see in us is that we recognize that we are just one small thing in the issues that you have at hand. But what we don't want to do is to get lost. Many of us who are part of this process, myself included, I'm a 42-year government employee. Government takes time. There's always more need in people than there will ever be enough money to take care of what you are challenged with every single day in your jobs. And what we're trying to figure out, and tonight's our first night, you'll see us more, and we'll try to be nice and sensitive of your time, but to really bring a voice to this community, but to really try to figure out how do we not get lost? And I know that as I've taught with Peg Rowe and getting to build relationships with people, that we're in it for the long haul with you to figure out, either through a future bond referendum or whatever it would take, to consider really making pickleball a signature. I had a great conversation recently with a leader of this community, and they said, Christina, we're doing really good on tourists. We're doing really good. We got more tourists than probably we can handle in this community on most weekends or even any day of the week. Because when we first started this conversation of how we would come talk to you, we talked about the tourists and the dollar and it being a destination and on all the stats that Sexton just recently shared. And all that's true. So I don't know to play the tourist card or not, to be really honest, as an advocate for this sport. But what I know is that when people come here, as you've heard from several people, they're looking for something to do. But I think the other thing, too, is to take notes. You have citizens that are, 800 people is a lot, and we're not even exaggerating. And what your courts look like. And I would just hope that in the future you will really consider, and I have all the faith in Dee, and I'll be a booger and relentless with him to stay close to the Recreation Department, but to also hope that we understand your budgets in the future, we understand your expenditures, and we can see some way or another that we can be part of your future vision and really having dedicated pickleball courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last pickleball person signed up to speak, and I do know that you all have established, I see Dee Tyrell bravely sitting there amongst you all.
With the white shirt on, too.
Right, he's got his white shirt on. Okay.
We show him.
Yeah.
Pink shirt.
And I know someone has recently met with Peggy Rowe, who wasn't able to be with us at this meeting tonight, but thank you for reaching out to us. And if you could maybe email us and establish a point of contact, that would be great to continue conversations around this. So thank you all for coming and sitting through the long meeting tonight.
And one thing I'd like to say, Esther.
Yes.
You know what? I've never played pickleball before, but I'm looking at these ladies here.
Let's go.
This looks like my group of ladies, right? I'm serious. Looks like a lot of fun. Thanks. Okay.
Does it have to be orange or no? Okay, yeah, I'm good with the orange. Okay. We have 3 other people that have patiently sat through this meeting as well, who also signed up to speak. Actually, 4. We have 4 more folks. So the next person signed up to speak tonight is Vicki Meath.
Hello, I'm Vicki Meath. I live in West Asheville, and I'm the director of Just Economics. I was actually not planning on coming to council tonight and watched some of your budget work session today. And it was the first time in the last 15 years that I know of that I saw a proposal by your staff to not keep up with the living wage rate as defined by Just Economics. So it felt a lot like a backtrack to me. And so I wanted to clarify some stuff around the living wage. First of all, the living wage policy was originally passed in 2007. It was updated, and I sent you all minutes back in February of the meeting from June 25th, 2013, when the living wage policy was updated to include adjustments. When I met with Peggy Rowe and Shannon Barrett a couple of months ago, this was the first time that I heard that this wasn't a policy. So I have some confusion on that. I might need to talk to Brad about that. But I also wanted to say that we haven't had to have this discussion because every year up until the pandemic, the city has kept up with our living wage rates. So whether that adjustment is in an official policy or not, the city was keeping up with that. There was some confusion around how firefighters were included, and since the pandemic, there's been some other complicating issues. But currently, our living wage rate is $17.70. This is what we consider a bare minimum, a starting place for a full-time employee to be able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment somewhere in the Asheville metro area as defined by HUD, which also includes Haywood and Henderson County, okay? To be able to afford it at 3 times, if you were working full-time, to be able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment and be able to afford 3 times the rent, which is a common standard that landlords ask you to prove that you do in order to obtain a lease. Our living wage rate is, again, a bare minimum. It is also in line with MIT's living wage calculator for a single individual in this region. It is a bare minimum. Again, it's not a wage that you can buy a house on. It is not a wage for a single parent. It is not a wage even to live in the city because rent is higher in the city. So I truly applaud you for your remarkable benefits. They are great. And I want to applaud that. But I also want to say that landlords don't take benefits into account when they're asking you to prove that you make 3 times the rent in order to qualify a lease. Additionally, not everyone at the city qualifies for benefits. We have hundreds of businesses in this community. We have the largest voluntary living wage certification program in the country. All right, I'll send you some more notes. I didn't have a lot of time for that.
Yeah, thank you, please do. Next we have signed up to speak is Jonathan Wainscott.
All right, I'll wait for Maggie to start her timer there.
I'm good.
Hey, my name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I just wanted to talk about something less interesting than pickleball. Man, I wish there were so many people to be interested in our creation of our council form of government. It was interesting that you brought that up tonight, and the possibility of a referendum, kind of some auspicious terms. This is the 1937 Homeowners Loan Corporation redlining map of the neighborhoods in Asheville rated on a mortgage security system, an ABCD rating, and you can see the large magenta colored area right there. That's a D1, and it's really difficult to see, but there are 3 other D-rated neighborhoods, 2 of them in West Asheville and one right above where the normal school used to be. And this is the area description of D2. You can see that under item 5, there was a large Negro population, 75% there. And then in the clarifying remarks, north end, western side, almost mountainous. Southern side contains railroad depot, big Negro business district, cheap houses. Eastern side, very rolling and whatnot. This was produced by William Coleman, Loan Services field representative, who was a prominent real estate agent back in the day. And his house is actually where the Chamber of Commerce is located right now, 36 Montford Avenue. Again, this is the redlining map. Let's see if it works. Oh my God, it's working. I did it. And if you transpose it over the 2018 Senate Bill 813 City of Asheville District Elections map that was created, you'll see that all of the redlined neighborhoods all existed, even the ones in West Asheville, in the Central District, except for that one little tiny part above in the normal school in the Kenilworth area. Let's do that just again so you can see all of that. This just pertains to the history of our district elections, the information available on hand, how it wasn't adequately discussed back in 2019, and leadership of this town led us over a cliff in renewing a Jim Crow policy that we still use today. It's a horrible shame. And I live in a town where pickleball is really important. So I'll be continuing this. My mayoral run is just a continuation, a sidestep of what I plan on continuing to do. Thanks for the help, man. That all worked out great.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Doug Brown.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, I love that our comments are including parks and pickleball. I think that's great. And maybe Memorial Park, as it gets renovated, can include some pickleballs. That could be a project. A couple weeks ago, I came here and talked about taxes going up. And I'm here tonight to either clarify or correct any misperceptions from that. I'm going to start with 2017 because that's when I got here. And it's clear that taxes have either gone down or gone straight as far as tax raises. They have not gone up. They've either gone down or stayed the same. But I can also look at when I've been here on my taxes that I get at home, and I can see that my taxes from 2017 to 2021 have gone up $1,000. I pay $1,000, over $1,000 now than I did when I got here. So how can this be that taxes haven't been raised, but I'm paying more? And I've learned that it is because we have county taxes, we have city taxes or raises, or and then we also have maybe city Asheville school property taxes. I guess the bottom line is that when we talk about taxes, remember that the taxpayers are looking at what they're paying. And it's not important where the blame game goes. We all, who raises the money and so forth. What I think the taxpayer wants to know is what taxes are being levied? What are they for? And where does the city council stand on those? Do you support them or not support them? Because you're our representatives and we want to know where you stand. For example, the quarter cent sales tax going on, I think that's the same as what Julie Mayfield's proposing for businesses, or is it in addition? Anyhow, I've read that Julie Mayfield is proposing a 0.25% sales tax for bike lanes. This one is for transportation, so maybe it is the same tax. But that kind of clarification is good, we'd like to know. Also, at last week's Buncombe County Commission's office, or Commission's meeting, a $70 million bond was floated on property taxes to pay for, I believe, $30 million is for conservation and equity, whatever that means. And the other $40 million is for affordable housing. What if property values don't go up and we're still tied to that property tax for $70 million? My ask, I guess, is there a way that city council can let taxpayers know, let businesses know, these taxes are being considered, this is what they're being used for, and we either support them or don't support them? Because I know some of these things you're not proposing, but we need to know if our representatives are representing us in either not supporting them and speaking up for us or supporting them for good cause. That's it. Thank you.
And our last speaker asked to be withdrawn. So I don't have any further speakers signed up for this evening, but we do have a closed session motion.
I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons. 1, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A1. The laws that make that information privileged and confidential are North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.10E, and North Carolina General Statute, Section 160A-168. And 2, to consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to the handling of the following matters: Padilla Sapica versus City of Asheville. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A3.
Have a second. If we stall for 1 minute, Maggie will be exactly correct that we got to 7:30. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will adjourn from the closed session.